Interesting insight. I was just wondering, from having you been around the industry for a good 21 plus years, and sorry to age you that way, why that's important in today's environment, in the market and in the marketplace, just how you perceive this, because you've probably got some thoughts on that view.
Yeah, I think first of all, I think the time now is right for data fabric. It's been a concept and an idea that's been around for a few years now, but it's gaining more kind of traction in recent years, and getting more publicity. And I think to understand why we want data fabrics or why we need it, it's probably a good idea to go back to kind of where I started 21 years ago, which was data warehousing. So 20 years ago, we had the problem where data was siloed. It was in your reporting was kind of done out of the operational systems that you had running in your organization, and often that data wasn't structured in a way that suited reporting. You also weren't able to be able to kind of to cross analyze across your applications, because each application had their own set of reporting, and also the data wasn't necessarily always trustworthy. It maybe had errors in it, or it wasn't consistent, or it wasn't able to be things like codification stuff wasn't consistent across the various applications. So the idea of the data warehouse was to basically get rid of all these silos of information, and bring everything into a single trusted source of data. And that worked well, right? And that revolutionized really reporting, I would say, for organizations, because we went from a situation where you couldn't really, you had to look at things on an individual basis, to being able to do cross-function reporting. You're able to point everyone to that same place. And so often we'd have something like a Cognos or a business objects tool then sitting on top of that as well, and these tools grew out of the data warehousing availability. And for a number of years they were enough, and people now had consistent, safe data. The silos were gone, and we had a central point of control. But what's happened is over time is that, due to a number of reasons, the data warehouse is no longer enough really to cover all the requirements of all the data requirements of a modern organization. I mean, the first thing is that the level of sophistication and breadth of what people want to do now from an analytics point of view has grown. Okay, so before we kind of generally had tabular reports and maybe a few little graphical reports that came out of things like Cognos and business objects, but now people want to be able to create dashboards. They came up, and also people want to do more interactive analytics, want to slice and dice data and interact with it with their hands, as in kind of real time. And these tools were aimed at kind of business users. So you started to get a proliferation of additional tools within an organization that were able to do these things like Tableau, for example, the kind of business users were buying for themselves, and were then started off by pointing them at the data warehouse, but then realized actually that not everything's in there that I want, and it takes long for me to get information into the data warehouse that I need. So they then started going to the data directly. Okay, so we started to kind of move away from this single point of the truth. And now we're starting to go. We started then to go back to this siloed kind of approach, and that's just increased. So there are now more and more kind of niche tools for niche reporting requirements that are out there. If you add to that as well the kind of the increased sophistication and requirements of analytics, we now have sort of model-based reporting. We have data science and all those kind of technologies and all those kind of disciplines as well. Again, they're introducing a whole lot of new tools as well that are all kind of wanting to grab data. Okay, and use it, and generally they're bypassing the data warehouse now, because either for agility or because that information doesn't exist there. So the other thing is that the breadth of information has changed as well. So whereas before we had these kind of siloed applications, we're able to get data mainly out their databases. Now we have data kind of residing everywhere. We have web logs. We have data that's in applications that are based in the cloud as a service. We have data that are kind of based on traditional systems still as well, on traditional databases, and we have other kind of all sorts of other systems that are kind of now all interoperating together. And also with the maturity of digital transformation within organizations in general, most of the applications now are also sharing information between themselves and interoperating. So what that's done is it's also broadened dramatically the information that's required by a business to be able to run their business, from just from moving from just being kind of traditional relational database data to now to all these different ones that I've just mentioned. So we need to be able to handle those, and they can't all go or shouldn't necessarily all sit in the data warehouse. And then aligned to that also is the demand for kind of real-time data. Okay, so again, when the warehouse first came out, we were able to get a way of loading a warehouse on a nightly basis, and that was kind of that was enough to be able to run your business. But with modern applications and the modern drivers in business, it's now perfectly possible for businesses to actually to enact on data in real time and make changes in real time. And so there's a genuine demand for real-time data as well. Okay, so these changes in business, these changes in people's appetite for data and their approaches to data, and wanting to have more and more self-service, has ended up with us going back to where we were when we started with the data warehouse, which was silos of information all kind of throughout the organization that are introducing the same problems that we had before. There's lots of, there's a big management overhead trying to manage all these connections to all these different systems. There's this inconsistency of data as people go and get their data from their own places. And there's kind of a lack of control as well. And that's a risk, right? Because by letting people go and access this data themselves, we can't control where they go, how much data they download, and whether they're accessing sensitive data and all these other kind of things. Okay, so the answer to that, the modern answer to that is basically is a data fabric. And the data fabric is designed to basically kind of to address all those different issues, and provide a modern kind of platform for you to do all the different things you want to do, but do it in a controlled and protected way, as we wanted to do when we created the data warehouse. So what that also means is that the data fabric isn't the end of the data warehouse or the data lake or those other things. It's actually it's just providing a mechanism for them to be surfaced, but also for these other sources of data to be surfaced that naturally don't necessarily sit in the data warehouse initially. Okay, so I think that's why we need a data. That's why we need the data fabric now, because the world has changed and the demands on data management have followed that.
Yeah.